Hello, everyone. My name is Carlos. I am the founder and CEO of Product School, and today I'm here with my friend Diego Granados, who's a product manager at Microsoft. Hey, Diego.
Hey everyone, it's a pleasure to be here. Carlos, thank you so much for inviting me. Super excited to be here with you chatting.
Thank you. You are such a big contributor of the product management community, so I'm excited to have a one-on-one time with you in public. So let's start from the beginning. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about your story, specifically how you broke into product management?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm originally from Mexico and I do have an engineering background, but I'm not a software developer. I studied electric engineering. Then I worked in business intelligence for 5 years. So working with data, working with customers. And the reality is that at this point, I didn't know anything about product management. It was not until I actually came to the US to study my MBA because I wanted to enhance a little bit more my business skills. I wanted to learn more about business. That's when I decided to come to the US, study my MBA, and that's where I learned about product management. But how did I transition to answer your question? Well, one of the things that I did is first I realized, okay, what exactly is product management? I talked to a lot of people. I read books. I read whatever I could find online. And what I did, or what helped me the most at the time, is I looked at my past experience. What things from the consulting experience helped me to translate this is what product management is, and I've done it before. And yeah, this is what product management is, and I can talk about it. And that was super exciting to me. That's how I was able to pass the interviews, make the transition happen.
So you basically did it the hard way because you had to figure out what this is product management and try to read some books because you said you learned about it in business school. But can you clarify that? Is it did you have a product management class or did you just hear about the concept of product?
Yeah, that's a good question because there are classes in a lot of business schools that are titled product management, but it's not the product management in tech that we know of. It's more product management in the CPG industry, so working with these consumer product goods and more like a brand manager. So we did have classes like that, but not so much as a product management in tech class. So the tech club contributed a lot. That was definitely something that helped. There's a lot of when you are joining business school, your second years come back from their internships, and that's where you start hearing. I joined the tech club, and we have all these panels where people talk about, oh, I did operations at Amazon, I did PM at Google, I did marketing at Microsoft, and so on and so forth. And so you get to hear from them, and that's where you start realizing, oh, there's these other areas that I could join. For somebody like me who didn't know about product management, that was super exciting as a first step to get into this world.
That's a really good point because by definition, the word product feels like physical. However, every single time we use the word product management, we are talking about digital products. So, in your own experience now working at Microsoft, how do you guys define what a product manager does there?
It's like most of the questions or most of the answers that PMs would tell you, it depends. In a company like Microsoft, I work on the business to business area of the products in the Dynamics 365 suite, and I work specifically in AI. And I'm kind of making that funnel into that area because we define product management. And let me just make a clarification here. As of today, Microsoft calls their product managers program managers. I have no idea why they haven't changed the title, but just to make that clarification. So anyway, long story short, we define there's no specific technical PM title versus general PM, but there's certainly the distinction in the role. So I work a little bit more of as a technical PM because I'm closer to the engineering, the data science team, working on the back end, working on making sure that our algorithms, our models are efficient, they are what the customer needs to do. Then you also have the more general PM, which also work with engineers, but work closer to design, closer to UX, closer to the customers. And that being said, that's in the business to business area that I work at Microsoft. But if you ask somebody who may work at, say, Office or Windows or Xbox on a more B2C product, that could also change. So I feel there's a lot of nuances and gray areas in how things are defined. And so PM is just a general concept that is handled by Microsoft.
Yeah, and then let's double click on that because I remember when I started my career as well, like I didn't know what product management was. And suddenly, as the world evolved, and then we ended up starting product school, a lot of people would come saying, I want to be a product manager, assuming that that is a common definition for pretty much every company, every product. And now we're seeing much more sophistication around that concept. And you mentioned just B2B versus B2C, consumer products versus internal products, AI products versus other technologies. So in your own experience, also interacting with different PMs, like what would you say are the main themes for people who are trying to figure out like where they can leverage their current skills?
Yeah, I think that one of the one of the main things to think about is, first of all, figure out your transferable skills. What I mean by that is, for example, I've talked to people who say, hey, I have 10 years of experience in this industry. And they think that breaking into PM is forgetting about that and then switching into a completely different industry or technology, when in reality, they can leverage everything that they've learned, all of those that industry knowledge and the transferable skills to, say, for example, somebody who has worked for 10 years in healthcare. They could be a great PM in the healthcare industry to start. If then later they want to switch to another company, that's also great. But I think that leveraging your own experience, your own expertise, I think it's one way to think about. The other, it's also, honestly, your passion. For example, if somebody is interested in machine learning, just as an example, and doesn't have that background, that doesn't mean that they cannot jump into machine learning as a PM. But you have to do a lot of the groundwork for that, because even if you get the interview tomorrow, they're going to ask you questions about machine learning. They're going to ask you questions about what it means to be a PM in machine learning. So you have to do a lot of research. You have to build side projects. You have to really put a lot of effort into that. And so that's kind of like a second thing that I would think about is you have a passion, follow it, but make sure that you do the groundwork. And then the third one, I would say it's something that not a lot of people actually consider, but I think that a lot of people think that, okay, let me try to get into product management. And if I don't get it now, that's the end. I'm not going to get it forever. When in reality, it's more about, hey, maybe, you can take a first step. And that first step is see if you like the company, see if you like the technology, see if you like working there. Get into the company in a role that you can get, comfortable with. You try it out, and then network your way into breaking into PM within your own companies. And so I think those are three big areas where people can think about, how do I jump into PM with or even without experience.
And I agree with you. And I think especially during the last 2 years, we've seen an extreme acceleration of the demand for product managers, but also it's such a hot topic these days. We went from what is product management again to, oh my God, I want to be a product manager at Microsoft or any other really cool tech company. And I think you're right. Like there's a process, and in that process, first of all, yes, take some time. Like but it doesn't mean that you have to go from 0 to 100. Like there's a lot of experience that you can leverage that maybe you have in a different capacity, working as an engineer, marketer, ops, whatever, even in an industry. And I always give that same advice to people when they ask, which is looking at this as a matrix. And if you are working in a specific industry in a different capacity, maybe you can try to become a PM there and leverage all the stuff, all the knowledge that you have, instead of trying to switch industries and roles at the same time.
Exactly. One thing that I quickly learned when I actually arrived to business school, regardless of product management, was there are three things that almost everybody that does an MBA, which, by the way, big parenthesis, you don't need an MBA to break into PM. It's just one of the ways to get into it. But there are three things that almost everyone is trying to change when they go into PM. When they go into their MBA. It's location, industry, and job. The more variables that you try to change, the harder it will be to go into just any other role, any other industry. And so if you fix on location and industry, you can switch roles easier than trying to switch industry and role. And so it could make it a little bit easier to lower the number of variables that you're trying to change at the same time.
Let's talk about internal mobility. I know there are some companies that have their own APM programs or similar. How does Microsoft think about empowering people who are not PMs yet to have a chance as a product?
One thing that I've seen at Microsoft that I really like, and it's something that I've actually seen it in my own team. I think Microsoft creates a place where you can express express your interest and say, I'm really interested in learning more about, in this case, PM. And I'm not going to just directly apply, but within the team, you could say, hey, I'm interested in maybe being more exposed to customers, or being more exposed to developers, or being more exposed to whatever other function. And the team is empowered to tell you, sure, all right, let's do this. You're going to do, yes, your job, you're going to be good at it. And then little by little, you're also going to take a few responsibilities. And when the time comes, if you want to do it, it's a matter of having conversation with your manager and the manager's manager, and then boom, yeah, that's it. You can make it. And we saw that happen in my team. We had a data scientist who was interested in jumping into PM. The data scientist said, I want to be a PM. So he got closer to the customers. He became this intermediate PM of talking to the customer right away. And after a couple of months, he spoke with his manager, with the PM manager, and now he's a PM on my team. So I think Microsoft fosters that culture of, if you want to try it, just go and do it.
I'm glad we are talking about this, because that doesn't seem to be an option for some people. They didn't even know that exists, that you can ask your manager just to contribute. And that doesn't mean that you're going to leave if the manager says no. I'm sure there are always options for you to help while keeping your current responsibilities.
Yeah, and I have to say that I wish that was the case in every company. The reality is that it's not, but it's certainly something that you need to find out, right? And if, I get it. Sometimes you don't want to just go into your manager and say, "Hey, I don't want to be a developer anymore. I want to be a PM." Find that through networking, figure out if there are similar stories, or maybe you can find out that in your company it's something that people actually don't like. And that's where you need to start making decisions, right? But at least at Microsoft, in my experience, it was something that the company, at least in these 2 years that I've been here, they're very okay with it. They encourage it. And I've seen it happen a lot of times, not only into PM, but PM to, different areas as well.
Mm-hmm. And now, obviously, as PMs, we're curious, and we're constantly playing with products and trying to learn new things. You mentioned at the beginning that you are now specializing in AI product management, or at least that's one of the products that you are working on. So I want to learn more about it. Like, how does a PM who already has a pretty good job and it's in a relatively stable position now says, well, you know what, I'm going to now try something new and continue in a different direction?
Yeah, it's a very interesting way that you need to think about it, because when you think of the role of a product manager, being a PM in AI, being a PM in mobile apps, being a PM in cloud technologies, there are a ton of transferable skills. But there's certainly a component, which is the technology that you need to ramp up. And sometimes there is some similarities, or at least some concepts that you can move from, say, if you were developing mobile apps into cloud. I'm sure there's a few components that you can mix and match there and be like, okay, I can understand what's happening even at a high level. In my experience, at least when I was making the jump into machine learning, it's a whole different world. It's so different that you can't abstract all the knowledge that you had in creating mobile apps or creating cloud applications or software as a service, and then suddenly, boom, understand the data scientist. So for me, making that jump, it required that I had to go back to classes and actually start taking, some online courses on machine learning, on something very specific, because I realized that as soon as I had my first meeting with a data scientist, it was a whole different universe. I couldn't translate anything from my past experience, but on the PM side, on the soft skills, everything was applicable. I didn't struggle with that part, if that makes sense. And so that's where I'm saying that if you want to suddenly, after many years of experience, say, I'm going to switch to something else, don't be afraid. There's some ramp up period. There's some knowledge that you need to gain, but the soft skills, everything is transferable.
Love it. And I think that's the mindset. Like, getting your first PM job is just the beginning of a journey. And nobody has figured this out. There is no one single playbook that teaches you absolutely everything you need to know. And I think having this type of lifelong learning approach to things and not being afraid of doing whatever it takes, it's really, really powerful. And just as a caveat here, I think it's important to realize that as a PM, you're never going to be the best at anything. It's more of a generalist role. So it's more about being curious or dangerous enough to really collaborate, in this case, with data scientists and other folks.
There was a conversation that I was having with an aspiring PM, and they asked me how would you define PM, and I was trying to go back to all the things that I've read and all the things that I've seen, and I told him, you know what, because I was having a very rough week during our conversation, I told them, you know what, being a PM is you see the fire and you run towards it. You don't have the equipment, but you just run towards it. That's all you have to do. And once you're there, once you know that you're at the fire and you know what is causing the fire, you bring the best people in, because you're not going to solve the problem yourself. And so yeah, you're absolutely right. It's about, you're not the best one in anything in particular, but you are the best person to bring everybody together to solve problems.
We have a lot of students, especially in the East Coast, or they come from consulting backgrounds, and they always ask about, okay, how is this different? And I always use that similar examples. Like in consulting, you usually tell people what to do, but you don't get into those details, right? Like in product, you decide what's going to happen, but then you go in.
Exactly. You have to. Yes, you said it right.
So, Diego, I know you also create a lot of content. You have a YouTube channel. There are a lot of people who learn directly from you. So how do you make time for all of this with your full-time job and also your master's degree?
It's I wish somebody would have told me what I had to invest. Well, no, that's not true, because if somebody would tell me what I need to invest in terms of time, I probably wouldn't have started. And that's not to say that I regret it, or oh my God, there's so much time, don't do it. This is more about, I treat it as a side project, and it's a side project that is really exciting to me. But I also have other responsibilities. I work at Microsoft. I have a family. I'm also, like you mentioned, I'm also a student in my second master's program, and I want to do this side project. And I can't be at a point where I'm going to fail in any of them, because then something is just going to snowball and into chaos, and that's going to be it. So there are a few things that I did before starting with these side projects, creating content and all of that. And that was kind of to debug my own life. I had to do a few things. Like, for example, I need to have a really, really good night's sleep. If I don't do that, I'm not going to function for all the things that I do. I needed to change my food habits. And you could wonder, like, why? How does that matter? Well, in the end, because of the pandemic, because we're working from home, because we're not moving as much, I needed energy. And yes, doing exercise is also something that I'm doing. But the exercise, gives you the energy, that spike, and then in the afternoon you're kind of really tired. So changing my food habits is something that has really helped me. All of this is the preface to say, I wake up every day at 5:30 in the morning to either exercise some days and then work on scripts or videos the other days. I sacrifice weekends, some mornings, some afternoons. I try to allocate time for very specific things, but it takes a lot of time and commitment. I have so much admiration for YouTubers who are full-time doing this, because it's way too much. But yeah, it's about making commitments, sacrificing things for sure, or making trade-offs, and having healthy habits.
And thank you for sharing that kind of vulnerable part of the story, because I think it's really powerful to realize that, hey, being a PM, or basically just being in a company, having big responsibilities, comes with a lot of hard work and constant commitment, and making those adjustments. And at the end of the day, that you treating yourself as a product or as an athlete to perform at your best. It's also what I think it serves as a reference for other people in your team to realize that we're playing a pretty competitive game. We are creating products. In your case, you're creating products that are impacting millions of people around the world. And that is not just something you can just figure out based on an idea in the shower.
Exactly. It's I think it's something great in these large tech companies like Microsoft, where I work, is that, well, everything you do is going to have a huge impact, and that comes with a lot of responsibility. And for anybody out there also thinking about side projects, just because you don't have the scale, just like when I started creating content, that doesn't mean that you don't have to treat your product with the respect, with the dedication that it deserves. Is, yes, you may not reach 1 million people day one, but why not aim to reach 1 million people whenever you reach it? So treat your product, both your work and your side projects, like they deserve.
I'm a big fan of side projects, either internally or externally. I think, especially for a PM, it keeps us our toes, keeps us fresh. Because especially as soon as one person grows and start having more and more people management responsibilities, it's hard to disconnect what's from reality. And I think having getting your hands dirty every once in a while, edit a video, report a bug, do whatever it might be, but just to realize to not lose that connection with the engineers and designers.
And that's something fascinating, which is a side project doesn't have to have code. It's great if you don't have that technical background and you add code to it. It shows that you're comfortable with technology. It shows that you can handle that piece. But just because you don't know how to code doesn't mean that you're out of projects. There are so many out there. I recently shared a story of another PM who did a whole project around an Excel spreadsheet, and now he launched a website, he put a business, and everything is about a single spreadsheet to calculate your finances. It has no code in it. And so it's just fascinating creating side projects. I would say it's definitely something, it's a must do right now for any aspiring PM.
Yeah, I think you're touching on a huge trend that's happening called no code. And I think it's amazing because it's really empowering creators out there. And PMs are obviously big creators in this movement, but it's all about, okay, there are building blocks out there like Legos that already work. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just need to connect them so you can then go and focus on adding value. And I know other PMs, and you're saying that you can build a website without code. You can create a business by connecting a spreadsheet with other tools. And I think that's ultimately empowering and making people believe that it is possible. And that, by the way, that doesn't make things any easier because you still need to figure out how to add value to your users. But at the same time, you don't need a CS degree. You don't need an MBA. You don't need a PhD.
Right. And let me double down on something that you mentioned, which I think a lot of people forget about. I get a lot of messages saying, "Hey, Diego, what's the best side product that I could do? I have a computer science background. What should I code or tell me what to build, and I build it." And you mentioned it. It's about creating that value. It's about treating the side project like a product manager would. It doesn't matter in the end if the color of the button doesn't look nice or it's not the best one. Is we talked about it. PMs are not the best at coding or marketing or sales, but we're the best at bringing everyone together. And so treat your project like a PM would, and do your best effort. And of course, make it pretty, make it nice, but don't focus too much on, oh, this is how it should look, this is how it should work, but rather talk about, this is the customer pain points, and these are the type of customers that I interviewed, and here's how I figure out the next step. Here's the prototype that I did. Here's how I validated that. Go through the full journey of all the way from your idea to launching this product, even if in the end ends up being a PowerPoint or a PDF, but treat it like a product manager would. Don't treat it like a software engineer or a designer. You have to see the full spectrum to really tell your story of, this is how I can be a product manager.
Let's talk about global products and diversity for a second. We're both immigrants living in the US, and we share a lot of things culturally and
Yes.
many ways. So what would you say for people outside the US who are hearing you and thinking, oh my God, this is awesome, but where I live or where I work, there's not much development around product management. How can they learn? How can they get access to other product leaders?
I think one of the great things that I wish I had when I was studying my MBA and learning about product management is that there's just so much content out there, and it's fantastic. It could be overwhelming, I get that, but it's also fantastic that you can get different opinions on what is product management, how to create a roadmap, how to create a lean canvas. There's just so much out there, so that's fantastic. But the best way to me to learn about the day-to-day of a PM, what does it mean to be a PM at a startup or a mid or a large tech company, network. And LinkedIn is a fantastic tool for that. I think, correct me if you think otherwise, Carlos, but I think one of the great things about being a PM is that we're so much time dealing with so many things and we talk to so many people, that at the same time, when somebody reaches out to us, we're very likely going to say, yeah, sure, let's talk or let's chat. Even if I can give you 5 minutes to answer a question on LinkedIn, I'll do it. So reach out to people. If you're living somewhere else in the world, send a message, because the worst thing that could happen is they don't respond. But for one that doesn't respond, 3 are going to say yes. So to me, that's the best way to learn about product management and the differences between companies, projects, all that stuff.
I completely agree with you. And first time I heard someone tell me, "Why don't you ask?" Yeah, that changed my life because I was so afraid of asking or thinking that maybe I was telling my stories in my head that they weren't true, and I think we all have our own backgrounds, and probably someone helped us down the road, and it's kind of in us to pay it forward. And yes, it's true that if you email 10 people, some might not respond or say no, but you just need one or two to say
Yeah,
yes, right? To take you to that next
exactly.
milestone.
Yeah, absolutely. Tailor your message to every person. Tell them what you want to learn from them, and I'm sure somebody will respond.
So, Diego, it's been a pleasure to chat and learn from you. How can we learn more about you and your content?
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. This was super fun. I love doing this kind of just side chats because I think it's amazing of all the content that is been out there. Right, I like I said, I wish I had all of this when I was studying my MBA. So about myself, you can find me on mostly YouTube. Just search for PM Diego or PM Diego Granados, as you can see my name. That's where I create most of the content. I'm starting also a newsletter, PM Diego, on Substack, where I share less frequent than on YouTube, but those are kind of the two most yeah. That's basically where you can find me as PM Diego.
All right. Well, thank you. Let's keep building cool
Yeah,
products.
awesome. Thank you so much, Carlos, and thank you everybody for watching.